Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth edition of Reading for Change, a series of conversations around books and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, co-hosted by Champaka Bookstore, Bengaluru Sustainability Forum, and Science Gallery, Bengaluru. As a brief introduction to the three co-hosting organizations, those of you who don't know us, Champaka Bookstore is an independent women-run bookstore, children's library and cafe. We bring diverse stories and perspectives for our readers through books and events. And you can buy this particular book, today's book, on the Champaka online store from where we ship all over India. The Bengaluru Sustainability Forum is an interinstitutional initiative funded by the Wipro Foundation and anchored in the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore, India. We work towards more interdisciplinary dialogue among stakeholders in the city, including conversations between regular citizens, academics, and journalists for an inclusive and sustainable future. Science Gallery Bengaluru is a public institution for research-based engagement at the interface between the natural and human sciences, engineering, and the arts. So, and again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we started this collaborative series in July. And, the genesis for this was when Lena of BSF approached Champaka sometime in May, wondering if we could do a collaboration around books and the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and it struck us as something that would be a natural thing for us to collaborate on, since it aligns so well with the values that we like to look at Champaka, which includes diversity and bringing in different perspectives and voices out in the foreground. And this afforded us a great opportunity to look at the SDGs in a different way. Because some of these SDGs have well-trodden paths of discussion and topics being looked at. And the fact that we could combine a book would mean that one particular angle could get highlighted, which often doesn't take, public, which is often not in the public discussions. So in the first of these events, which was looking at the SDG, Sustainable Cities and Communities, we looked at a young adult book called Scavengers. And this, as part of looking at this book, we had a discussion with the author and a university student, along with another event with the Seema Mundoli and Seema Mundoli of APU and Lakshmi Karunakaran of Hasiru. In these events, we attempted to explore the themes of the book, looking at people who work in landfills and live near them. And the aim was to look at the vast scope that the SDG, had through the lens, through angles, like I mentioned, that aren't often in public conversation on the SDGs. So similarly, the second event was a conversation between Angela Saini, the author of Inferior, the book we chose for the month, and Professor Vidita Vaidya of TIFR Bombay. And the theme was looking at gender equality, which was the focus of the SDG in the context of women in science. So again, it's a conversation of interest, I'm sure, because if you look at gender, gender equality would have so many dimensions. But choosing this book opened up a different angle in the conversation. The third event was a conversation between science writers David Quammen and the author of Spillover, which was a book on emerging zoonotic diseases, and Anil Swami, in the context of the SDG, good health and well-being. And now, coming to our fourth event, we are here to discuss the book Ordinary People, Extraordinary Teachers. the book by S. Giridhar in the context of the SDG quality education. So here we are to welcome the author, S. Giridhar, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Azim Premji Foundation. And with us also is Uma Mahadevan Dasgupta, Principal Secretary, Government of Karnataka, who's had also a lot of experience looking at the system and the government side. And it's wonderful that here are two people who are bringing in a lot of experience of many decades into this conversation in on quality education and ordinary people, extraordinary teachers. So welcome to both of you to today evening's conversation. So if we can start, Giri, if I can start with you, I'll start with the obvious question. Since we are looking at this book, why did you write this book? In this book, you say in your introduction that you call teachers unsung heroes, and in the cover itself, it says the real heroes of India. So, is there something there for us to see that for your motivation to write this book?
Yeah. So, hi everybody, and thanks for this opportunity. I thank Bangalore Sustainability Forum and Champaka. Hello to Uma Mahadevan, who's here with us. Thank you very much. Tejasvi, the way to answer your question is actually to say that the book actually was not planned, and that's the honest answer. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, at the Azim Premji Foundation, we thought that we've been working for 14, 15 years. It was 2017. I remember in one of our foundation's board meetings that we said that, look, we've been working for a long time, and we are collecting a lot of information, data, etc. But it would be nice to go back to those many places where we are in touch with thousands and thousands of teachers, working with them in a deep and sustained manner, engage with them day in, day out. Is there any way we can go there and get some kind of nice quotidian stories, if I can say so to speak, of teachers there? And there was no intention of a book. I just volunteered and said, look, I have been with the foundation from virtually the beginning, and was deeply involved with the field work for the first 10 years or so. Before I moved to the university, when the foundation started the university, I moved there to help contribute there. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to go back to the field once again, to cull such information and stories, etc. There was no intention of a book. But it so happened that as it
emerged naturally.
Absolutely emerged naturally, because as I went there, I realized that it was not something that I could go there and come back in 10 days or 15 days. We'd been working in, let us say, about 10 to 12 districts since 2001 and 2, and probably in another 30, 35 districts since 2011, 12, 13, and so on. So I said, let me go to 5 of the districts where we've been working the longest, and let me go and meet a cross-section of teachers. And the 5 districts we chose were Yadgir in Northeast Karnataka, Sirohi and Tonk in Rajasthan, and Uttarkashi and Udham Singh Nagar. When we went there, I said, let me go and meet a cross-section, means let me meet a reasonable sized number of teachers. So I went to my colleagues in each of those districts. And in each of those districts, as you know, each district has about 5 to 6 or 7 blocks, depending on the size of a district. And I said, can you folks just point me towards the teachers you would like me to meet? So it is not a random thing, but I said, I want to meet the people who you think are doing good work. Get me to your good teachers. And it was not very complicated in terms of saying, this is the framework I want to use. I want you to tick these boxes. Nothing of the kind. Aap unke saath kaam kar rahe, you're working day in, day out. You know surely who you think are good. And you won't believe it. In each of those blocks, people overnight were sending me names that I had difficulty in sifting. So suddenly, in a very short while, I had about 750 teachers' names in those 5 districts. And if I had waited, I would have got even more. Can you hear me?
I can imagine. Yes, of course. Yes, Giri. We can hear you.
Okay. And then I said, okay, if I have these 750 teachers or so from these 5 districts, let me at least visit around 110 teachers there. And the 110 is roughly nothing but say around 20 to 25 teachers in a district, say about 4 or 5 per block. Let me distribute it in such a way and go and meet them. And the beauty is that as I met them, I realized that while they may have pointed me to a teacher in a school, I realized that that teacher's colleagues were equally interesting and equal fun. And I ended up actually interacting with about 250 to 270 teachers.
Wow.
From my first visit to a school in Shorapur or Surpur in Northeast Karnataka to my last school that I visited in Tonk, it was from March 2017 to November 2018. And I was doing this while I was also doing my work at the university, so I had to split my time and so on and so forth. But I had at least 10 registers of notes filled in. And as I went through those notes started talking to me. You know, when you go the first day, you don't absorb much. You take notes, you write to them, you talk to them, you build a rapport, you understand, you soak in the atmosphere, you see the teacher, you see the classroom, you talk to the community. And all this, the only thing is you jot it down. But as I read and reread those notes, they took a life of their own. I initially prepared it, you won't believe it, I prepared a 20-page monograph. That's all.
Is that right?
So that's why I said organic. But then as I shared that monograph with a few people, and then I opened those registers of mine and shared with people that I have taken these kind of notes, one realized that actually we would not be doing justice to those people who shared their lives with me if we didn't bring it to public.
Right.
These are teachers working in various corners of India. They are doing their job. Nobody knows anything about them, but they are singing to their own tune. There's some bugle within them to which they march. There is some ambition, some junoon, something about them. That's why they are truly unsung. Nobody realizes that Madhulika actually leaves home at 6 in the morning after having cooked for her family and having done everything for her joint family, then takes a bus, then takes an auto, then takes a bus, then climbs 2 kilometers up the hill to be at the school in time at 7:45, never having missed a day for the last 2 years. And back home after that, and by the time she sleeps, it's about 11:30 in the night. Nobody knows that Madhulika runs across, along with her colleague, across 5 classes doing this and manages a...
Giri, we've lost you.
Sorry, I think I fiddled the wire.
Yeah,
I think you must have lost me just for a second. I wanted to say that when you go and talk to the community यहाँ पे इतनी बारिश होती है. The monsoons in Uttarkashi are so severe, but I don't think any child has missed a class for the last 3 years. And then there are some community members who say, do you know that she is the best teacher in the world here? And I say, world? They say, but the village is my world.
That's right.
So when you look at it from the community's point of view, you realize how much they engage with these teachers, how much the teachers are invested in the school, and nobody 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer away from them knows that such a teacher is there. These are truly unsung because we don't know their everyday lives, their everyday worries, their everyday aspirations, their everyday joys. In fact, in somewhere in the book, and some of the reviews have mentioned that their diaries are actually mandatory reading. Forget the book. If you open some random pages of the diaries that teachers write, I don't think there can be a person who will not be moved.
Of course, I agree. Uma, when you read the book, did you get that feeling that, and you have been in the government for many years now, and I'm sure you have interacted with teachers, especially with Anganwadi workers, since you were in the Women and Child Welfare Department. So did you get the same sense that Giri is sharing with us, that these teachers are complete unknown figures and we have all kinds of images of them, but their lives are completely unknown and we need to really talk about them and get to know them better?
Yes, Tejas, absolutely. I felt, in fact, while reading Giri's book, it brought back exactly the feeling of discovery, of insights into the lives of people who are very self-driven, quite extraordinary, and at the same time they're ordinary, because they're, as Giri has said, they're ordinary heroes, and that is what is extraordinary about them, because they're at the front lines of our early childhood and our education system. They're working in remote places. Often they're working under extremely difficult conditions. For example, it may be the landscape, it may be the terrain, it may be the timings, it may be the distances they have to traverse, and women teachers especially, but all teachers, but women particularly shouldering double burdens, the burden of domestic care work and household responsibilities very often, and yet they come there and they show up, and they show up every day, and they do their work with sincerity and with imagination and creativity, which is really something that is so amazing. And it's something that is also not it doesn't come to our general consciousness, to the public consciousness, when work just goes on. But it's only the blips and the glitches that we notice, but actually the fact of so much significant work happening, solid, significant work happening, helping children, caring for children, teaching them, helping them to learn about their world, solid work that goes on day after day, and in a completely unsung manner. It's truly amazing. I've seen it. I've seen it, as you mentioned, Anganwadi teachers. I've seen it in an Anganwadi deep inside the forest in Mysore. I've seen it in Anganwadis deep inside the plantations in Kodagu. I've seen it in a corner of Bidar, where self-motivated, driven people are actually keeping these fires alive, the fire of learning and of imagination and of creativity, and that's completely extraordinary. And I love that it came through in Giri's book in such a textured and layered manner too.
No, truly. And that actually brings me to another aspect, Giri, in the book that you've written. You've organized it in an interesting manner to present us different facets to this, what does it mean, this unsung hero? Is it just some kind of when you typically think of a hero, you have certain images in your mind. But here we look at it from, in the context of education, you have certain specific lenses that you have used to tell the story in a way, like to set these particular teachers in, and you highlight certain aspects of it. It's not that their lives are divided in this way. Like, say, for example, one of the sections in the book that you refer to is teachers as leaders in the first section. And in that particular section, you are looking at teachers from the context of school leadership. But at the same time, you're also looking at other aspects of their life and their connect to the community and so on. It's not that, but it's just that in that section, you've highlighted one aspect, including that. So can you just share a little bit about your thinking behind why you did it? And then we can go a little bit into each one, maybe.
Okay. So lest I forget, I'll tell you the two things I want to say, and then if I forget, you can remind me.
Sure.
One is about the unsungness and ordinariness of them, and they are yet heroes in the real sense. And the other is the organizing of the book in those 5 major attributes, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
The fact of life is that for many people, it's not always that romantic notion that I wanted to be a teacher and I became a teacher. Teaching is just a means of livelihood for many of them. Many of them were ordinary 12th class passed people who did a BTC or a teacher training and became teachers. Some did a graduation and became a teacher. And of course, I also have met a Fundu PhD in mathematics who is teaching in a school. But by and large, it's the ordinary people. One of them proudly said, I scored 42 in my PUC, 42% in science in PUC. And then I became a teacher. And then I went to CFL, interestingly, Tejasvi, for 5 days of training. And then I realized what I should do. And I determined to improve myself. And then I'm a science teacher and so on. Ordinary people. Right. Let me give you another example of this fact, that very often the occupation, they don't choose an occupation chooses them. I have three of the heroes. Let me briefly mention three heroes. One is a person who was a tourist taxi driver in Abu Road.
Satyanarayan Bhairav.
Okay. Satyanarayan was a tourist taxi driver.
Right.
Then after a few years became a teacher and is now a much revered, beloved teacher there. Self-driven, self-taught, learnt and become a hero there. There's another person who was actually a loom he was working in the loom in Bhiwandi in Maharashtra, came home on a holiday and one of his friends said, I'm a cluster resource person in this place. Why don't you become a contract teacher or a Shiksha Mitra here? And he joined there and then became a full-time teacher and is now a teacher there. The third person from our own Karnataka started as an electrician. He was winding transformers before he became one of the best. It is a pleasure to meet Parameshwaraya. Ordinary people across. And therefore, that's important. So I want to explain to you that very often you will find that it's not that the guys who do outstanding in 12th and academics and go on to do other things, unfortunately, are not the people who are choosing teaching. Many of them go elsewhere. But the people who choose teaching and then make a fist of it, devote and respect. And the way they keep developing themselves and growing themselves, worthy of the greatest respect. So let me now talk of the 5 ways I grouped them, because as I was visiting each school, you can imagine it took me about 15 months and I'm taking notes and I'm visiting different schools.
I know.
Somewhere I see an assembly being done well. Somewhere I see a community supporting them. Somewhere I see a teacher doing innovative stuff in a classroom. I'm seeing a variety of strands of good work. Exactly. And yet I'm seeing intrinsically a pattern that is developing. So when I read and collated all of these, I realized that I may have 17, 18 strands, but these 17 or 18 strands essentially fall into 5 broad groups. So the first group is, please remember that a teacher in a school who is managing the school is actually responsible for a 360-degree vision of the school. The CEO of the school in the center of the school, managing relations with his functionaries who is in a block or a district, managing relationships with the community who are all around him, with his co-teacher or teachers, with the children, and making sure that the garden is okay, the assembly is done well, the toilets are functional, the books are coming in time, the uniforms are of good quality, children are in good space, they're safe and cared for, and the community knows that learning is happening here. Dasavadanam. You look at a guy juggling nothing less than that and doing it as though it's part of life. And if you tell them, boss, itna sab kar rahe ho, they'll squirm and feel embarrassed and say, this is just a job, I'm managing it.
Exactly.
So I want to place before people that when you look at a head teacher of a school, please remember that's no less than the CEO of an organization. That unit is actually a very independent unit sitting there, and he or she is the CEO of that institution. The second thing I realized, connected with the ordinary people and their extraordinary work, is their commitment to development of themselves, not only because they want to improve themselves, but out of a commitment to the children. The children are dependent on me. They have these few years here, and let's be realistic. The children who come to our government schools have a very small window. In those 5 or 6 years in a primary school, the teacher has to make sure the child develops into a lifelong learner, and from there goes on to complete 10th, 12th, and further education and make a life for himself or herself. Those 5 years are so precious to a child in primary or the 8 years in elementary that the teachers feel extremely responsible to them. And therefore, when I say that they want to develop themselves and improve themselves, it's not only for themselves, but because of a responsibility for the children. So the reflective practitioner, the one who is committed to lifelong learning, is the second important bucket of outstanding teacher attribute that I connected with.
Truly.
You know, just a small deviation. I keep doing this, so you can cut me if I go too long. But you know, 15 years ago, when I used to go into the field, I'll find the odd teacher writing a diary. I'll find that when there are some magazines and publications of some academic interest pitched at an accessible level, a handful of teachers will read, but many of them will have to be brought into what is known in Hindi as a samoor. And in a samu, you'll have a meeting and there'll be a coordination and make them read and things like that. Today, when I went there to these schools, those teachers are writing diaries. Those diaries sometimes will thrill you and at times will move you to tears, both. And I'm not ashamed to say that I wiped a tear or two sometimes when I read those diaries. But those diaries for me were signposts of commitment to development. And I realized that they're also contributing to magazines and writing. So the reflective practitioner is the second bucket. The third bucket is very important to India. We have in our constitution enshrined the goals of fairness, equity, equality, and an equal opportunity to everybody. That's how society will grow. That's how we visualize a good Indian society, good society in India. For the teacher, the school is a microcosm of the society, and the classroom is where they can operate. In the classroom, if I see equity, in the classroom, if I see equal opportunity, if in the classroom I see gentleness, if in the classroom I find children discussing rather than arguing, if I find children helping themselves, and I find teachers giving as much time to the last child in the last row as to the first child, if I see teachers rotate the children in a classroom without any fixed seating and devoting time equally, to me, that is a manifestation of equity and quality in the classroom. If I see teachers tell themselves that, look, time is so precious. By the time my children leave class 5, I must prepare them so that they do very well in upper primary. If I prepare them so that they can get into Navodaya school, if I can prepare them so that they can get into Rani Chennamma school, if I can prepare them so that they can get into the Morarji schools, to me, that is the biggest manifestation of a commitment to equity and quality. And they don't cherry pick 2 or 3 children. Let me make that clear. Right. If a class 5 has got 7 children and class 4 has got, say, 8 children, they will take all these 15 children through that 1.5 period of preparation. At the end of it, Tejasvi and others on the meeting here, maybe 1 or 2 children will get into a Navodaya, not more. Right. The important thing is the other 13 children have been prepared for lifelong learning.
That's right.
So that's the third thing. The fourth thing to me is that in all these meetings and all these discourses around education, I find very little attention paid to teamwork among teachers. And I realized the grand gestalt formula here that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So when you have 4 teachers in a school or 5 teachers in a school working together, you suddenly see that what a school is capable of and what a school delivers is much more than what the 4 of them individually would develop. And I find in all those places where my colleagues pointed me and said, Illi nalla olle teacher idare, I go there and actually find that there is a group of teachers working together. So I think I didn't want to miss the glorious feeling of teamwork among teachers, and I categorize that as a 4th important attribute.
Yeah.
The fifth is, of course, the maverick. I have no place. They were a bit of everything. But they were risk takers. They were the Zorros. They were mad. They were eccentric with their passion. They would take all kinds of crazy risks because they believed the children, they owed it to the children. That's why the 5th chapter is just called Heroes. I mean, there's no way I could bucket. They could well have belonged to either of them, but the risk-taking that they took set them apart. So these are the 5 Tejasvi. So I've covered.
Oh, yeah, you did. And we'll come back to a few examples there. Uma, did you recall any which kind of struck you in particular? Because coming from, working in the government, you would have seen many individuals, working very hard, like you mentioned, in a completely unsung manner. And at the same time, you also see that there is a context in which they work. The government context demands that they have certain responsibilities, that they have to kind of attend to deadlines, budgets, various things on a daily basis in addition to their work at home. So as people and as extraordinary individuals, in some ways, Giri, I feel that they are extraordinary individuals as well. They are ordinary in the sense that they are like your neighbor, or they are from everywhere. but they're also quite extraordinary in the range of things that they have to do. So what do you see from a systemic perspective? What is the importance of these individuals? Do they, in some ways, does their work add up in some ways, and does it make a difference in?
Oh, absolutely. As Giri said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, not only in the teamwork that goes on to make up a school, but I would say that the work of these people, educators working at the front lines, whether they are in early childhood or whether they are in teaching, I would even add the non-teaching staff. I remember in one school that Giri had visited, he wrote about how the midday meal cook was also a part of the planning team in the school, and I found that very beautiful in some way, because we often forget the non-teaching staff, but the non-teaching staff are people who care for the children, take the children to the washroom, show them how to wash their hands, cook their food, do so much of creating the school environment. So I think they are the educators and the entire set of people who work to educate our children, right from Anganwadis and preschools all the way up to school, high school, junior college even. They are the people who actually, the people working in far off, dispersed, distributed areas and remote areas, but they're the people who actually are not only keeping the system going, but actually taking it forward in some way. Because we know all the challenges. We know the challenges that exist, and we know that there are more and more challenges with every passing year. For example, this year itself, during COVID, we still have a tremendous challenge that we have never faced, of the kind that we have possibly never faced before, at a scale that is totally unprecedented. But even then, we have people concerned about their children. Are their children learning? Are their students learning? Are there ways in which we can reach them? Are they getting food? Are they getting nutrition? Are the mothers being looked after? There are Anganwadi workers who will go and do home visits at this time. And there are Anganwadi supervisors who still send me WhatsApp messages saying, this is what happened and we heard about this. And they share the most, as Giri said, diaries, reflective practice, and this ability to communicate, because they do look for supportive supervision, and they look for a way to share and network and learn from each other. And they share the most amazing stories of there may be a child marriage which has come to their notice and it has been stopped. And the fact that a child marriage has been stopped is actually a remarkable thing. I mean, it's something we just count in terms of numbers. And sometimes we actually, we look at the statistics and we say, okay, this many thousand child marriages have been prevented. But actually, it's a remarkable thing. You're dealing with emotions. You're dealing with families that are in economic stress. They may be, it's not parents who just want to dispose of their well child. It's parents who are in financial difficulty who are doing this. And the sense of commitment, the sense of sincerity and passion with which they go ahead and do this. So at a systemic level also, I would say that the entire system functions the way it is because there are so many people doing the job that they're doing. Whether perceptions of the system reflect that is a different question, because perceptions of the system are kind of viewed like, it's very hard to look at a system in a holistic way. You're always looking at it from one perspective, like the story of the 6 men and the elephant kind of thing. You're looking at one corner of the system and you think that particular corner represents everything. That's not so. But the entire the base, the foundation of the system is being sustained by the extraordinary hard work and daily commitment of people who are working because they believe that they need to do a good job on the ground. Even if it's just 7 children or 10 children or 3 children in their school, they need to go there, show up, teach them, help them to learn, keep the premises clean. That's the basic commitment by which the system continues.
No, but that's right, Uma. I mean, both of you are commenting on the. I mean, in some ways, we are getting now to a point where I think most people appreciate the kind of work that. And if you read this book, for sure, you'll get individual stories which tell what both Uma and Giridhar have pointed among the way of the various facets that goes into working in a school, in a system, and in communities and in places. There are multiple challenges that they have to face. But now, particularly since you brought up today's times that we are in, right? And maybe we can look at it briefly. Like the challenge of the times is COVID, and we have the same extraordinary individuals participating, taking up new challenges, and taking up new that perhaps they themselves wouldn't have encountered. None of us have encountered within our lifetimes. I can't recall the last time something like this happened, in living memory. So if you look at something like this, and we have changes in the system that is also due in some sense, in a year or two, we have the national policy on education that will also be rolled out, and that will bring with it its own challenges for everybody to because it will bring in change. So if you look at such changing circumstances and such wonderful people who are there, what do you both feel in terms of the abilities of these people to encounter among the people that you have met and then that you have known, that their strength and their ability to tackle new challenges and tackle new scenarios and situations? What has your experience been, and what you feel it's going to be like?
You want me to go first?
First, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. In every aspect of it, what you say is, as a rule, an important thing to consider, Tejasvi. The fact is that in what I have written about are a small set of teachers, but it's only a sample.
Right.
You look at it, a number of them are of that kind. If I cast the net wide, I'll find many more. So if you look at what people are doing during the COVID times, I have a number of stories already from the field, from across the places, where people are saying how teachers are coming together to do various things. The point is that there is also a significant, if I were to use a normal distribution curve, it is not that the right side of the curve is so tight and small. It is actually a fairly broad, bell-shaped curve, and there are a reasonable number of people there. And then there are sufficient number of people in the middle who are looking at inspiration, ideas, and things like that, willing to try out.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just had some input from one of the districts where we are working, where people have decided, okay, this is what we can do during COVID. Tomorrow it will be something else. So I think the good thing is the good thing to remember is that I may have written about, say, I may have gone to 5 districts and picked about some teachers, but they're actually representative of thousands and thousands of such good teachers.
Of course, for sure.
And there are a number of teachers, unsung, who are doing what they can. And I think the system also needs to see how best they can use those teachers, Tejasvi.
Yeah, of course.
So that's what I wanted to say, that while this book, obviously, like any book, if I say reflective practitioner, write 10 stories, those 10 stories are actually representative of the thousands of such teachers.
Of course.
But there are many more, as I said, in a bell curve. You will find obviously those who will obviously look and absorb stuff that they can do. People are willing. So we have something known as, let us say, the Voluntary Teacher Forum.
Exactly.
Okay, the Voluntary Teacher Forum is something where teachers voluntarily come to participate. And these started in a few places many years ago. Today, across all districts, in all blocks, teachers come together voluntarily during their free time, on a weekend, on a evening, late evening, and come together to a teaching learning resource center and come together. And then why are they doing that? They're doing that because of a sense of responsibility of tomorrow, I want to be a better teacher than I am today.
And they're doing it even now.
Isn't it? And they're not doing it because they're damn good at it. They want to get better at it. They may be not so good at it, but they get better at it and they're absorbing and so on and so forth. So I think it's important to recognize that people want to do that. You must have that belief that people want to do a good job. We must recognize their difficulties. We must see what are their difficulties and make sure that we make it better for them. Yeah. So it's the same with the COVID. I've heard enough stories of how teachers are creating innovative stuff, doing things, sharing with each other. And let me not also forget that very often there are very helpful authorities at the district, at the block level who encourage them, bring them together and use them. Many of the teachers who are featured here have actually become or are already resource persons for the block and the district to use in their capacity building programs.
Not surprising, given the accounts that you
Absolutely.
Shared. Yeah. Uma?
Yeah, so I wanted to agree entirely with Giri. I think educators as a community, everybody working in education and working in early childhood, working with children, the way our schemes are, our ICDS program and our Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan program, our education program, are designed in such a way that I think, the community working at the front lines of education, if you just take something like the COVID pandemic, you talked about the pandemic. Yeah. This year itself, in the last few months, Anganwadi teachers and primary school teachers, government teachers have shown extraordinary resilience and adaptability and creativity in reaching out to children, in taking up the new responsibilities. In addition to actually transacting what is going on in the classroom, COVID has thrown up new responsibilities like going house to house, checking on children, delivering the midday meal rations or delivering the Anganwadi rations, supervising the delivery of these rations, ensuring that the delivery of the rations happens with proper physical distancing and masks and so on. Creatively trying to find open and well-ventilated space for the Vatara Shale, the neighborhood school, neighborhood learning program, trying to lobby with the Panchayat. We have, from the Panchayat side, we have actually taken up several steps to support teachers and support frontline workers, support children through our network of rural libraries. We have 5,600 rural libraries. We've just launched a program called Odura Belaku, where we'll be happy to host learning centers, even in the libraries, wherever there's space. And in any case, we're enrolling all rural children free of cost as members of the rural libraries across our 5,600 libraries. Again, to do this, to implement this, and to take up a house-to-house survey, because right now we are finding that there is a number of children are either never enrolled or a small number, that may be a very small number of school dropouts, out of school children, but there's also a number of children who have come back to the villages on reverse migration. There are children who are perhaps due to livelihood difficulties, economic hardships of their parents, those children are moving back from private schools to government schools. So there are children who, as I said, because of economic difficulties or because of the social context, are girl children especially, are being pushed into child marriage. So all of these cases will need to be identified right now, because these children are especially vulnerable. And we have set up a Gram Panchayat level education task force, where we have the Panchayat officials, the Panchayat elected members, along with the education department, along with the teachers and the school heads and the SDMC chairs. In Karnataka, the SDMCs are chaired by parents. We'll also have women members of the self-help groups, women's collectives. We also have, I'm very proud to say that we have 2 children of the Panchayat in each of these task forces. Yeah.
It's a deeply collaborative work.
Yeah, it's very collaborative. It's also, it also involves retired teachers who stay in the Panchayat, involves local NGOs, involves the Scouts and Guides and so on. And this task force will be responsible for doing a house-to-house survey, identifying children who are at risk of either not being enrolled or dropping out of school, organizing for them to be enrolled back in school, ensuring that linkages, if there are children who are, say, the children of sex workers, who are children of Devadasis or children of children with special needs, children of rescued bonded labor, vulnerable category children who need to be protected from going back into bonded labor, manual scavenger, whatever, then such children will be offered the option of residential schools. So all of this, a very detailed protocol has been drafted and is now the responsibility of the Gram Panchayat Education Task Force, which is not something that's being imposed on educators or imposed on the panchayats, but has come out of organic and localized efforts which have actually been taken up by the teachers and by the Anganwadi workers and by the panchayats in order to help children learn. So that energy has actually come back to us systemically, and we are only formalizing it in the form of our enabling orders to ensure that this is happening. And this is why I have great hope for the prospects of change, because I find that they're extremely adaptable to change and extremely ready to take on new challenges. A community which is usually, I think Vimla mentioned in the chat, they're usually so vilified. They're
Yeah, that's right.
in such a derogatory way. But now they are the ones that are actually the salt of the earth, and we find that they are out there doing their work, caring for their children, ensuring that their children get opportunities to learn, and it's because of them that the system is actually so resilient.
Yeah. In fact, this brings me to an example. Many of the things that what you mentioned, Uma, and what you mentioned, Giridhar, get reflected in this example of Basavaraj Dalwai, one of the heroes that you mentioned, and one of my favorites teachers that I read here, and he, if I can just quote from the book. So he's, so Basavaraj Dalwai is part of the government lower primary school in Pirnaiknatanda, Surpur block, Yadgir district in Karnataka. And so what Giri does in talking about Basavaraj is, I mean, this is typically how the case studies that he presents are written. So there is usually an introduction to where this happens. At some point, you'll get to know about the place, and then you get to know about the person. So you get to know not just the teacher, but the community where the teacher works. And in that, in some sense, what Uma was mentioning, if you're not familiar with, say, with how the system works and how rural communities are structured, in this particular context, in the context of education, you'll get a flavor of that for sure. Say, for example, the fact that there are SDMCs, which are important in these rural communities as a practice where parents are involved in the running of the school. They have a stake in it. So that is an important feature of every community, every primary school, every school across the country. And many of us actually, I don't think, are very much aware that something like this is there, And so if we say, what's the role of the community? How does the community engage with the teacher, and how does the teacher engage with the community? And in PN Tanda, where Basavaraj Dalwai's school is located, so Giri calls him one-man army. As a 24-year-old, Basavaraj Dalwai arrives at the Tanda. So the Tanda is a community of largely Lambani, people, Lambani, from the Lambani community. And here you see that it has 140 homes spread over 5 habitations, mainly comprising the SC, ST, and Kurba communities. So what does Basavaraj do? He goes and introduces himself to each of them. So he makes himself known. And after that, you have a description of his work and what happens on a daily basis. What is it like? What does it mean to be in a school there? And there, I mean, I'm not going to give away too much of it, because then it'll take away from your reading of the book. But it describes to you what, just through his day, what he does. And through that, it gives you facets of his personality, his approach to his work, his colleagues, his approach to learning himself. Why is it important to learn for himself? So Giri says, Basaraj is an avid learner himself. During the last 7 years, he acquired BA and BEd degrees through correspondence, and he has become computer literate too. He has a computer at home on which he browses the internet and also compiles data that the block and district authorities ask him for. So a lot of things that would have otherwise taken a lot of time writing, then transcribing, getting someone to do it, he does it everything by himself. Now, that is someone who's not just taking interest in his work, but also going the extra mile to do it. And what else does he does? Again, I'm not going to tell you more, but there are so many such people who make, even times like these, to keep schools, to keep learning opportunities open. And that is what I think, what we can take from this book, at that it is, it makes these personalities alive to people, even today, as in even in these difficult times where we don't see each other much in the cities that we live in, where we're kind of isolated and so on, and think the world must be like ours, while it is not. Each community has to live and to face the challenges, and many of the children have these teachers who are kind of trying to hold them on a daily basis. So we have this book trying to open these up for us. So as one side to this, I think in context to the series that we are doing as far as the sustainable development goal is concerned, the quality aspect to it, quality education. We talk of quality in a particular way and we have stereotypes around it. What do you feel, both of you, and you as a writer, Giri, and as someone who has encountered quality and who has written about it here, right? What do you envisage as, what do you see as quality, and why is it important here? And is it different from perhaps the kind of limited sense of quality means, say, a certain output, a certain score, or a certain, acquiring a particular job? What do you see is quality here? And Uma, I would pose the same question to you afterwards. Yeah, and why is it important? How do you want? What do you write about it in your book?
So let me begin the conversation, and then Uma can take it on.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say this, that in each of these places that I visited, in most of these good schools that I visited, one learns a lot about quality when one observes child-to-child engagement, child-to-teacher engagement, and the way they address and recognize things. So the way they are able to tease out important things through conversations, the way they are able to discuss things, the way they are able to express themselves, the way they are able to process new things, these are all fascinating. So when you realize that the child is being encouraged to develop his or her own understanding of many things. The ability to collaborate is a very important thing. Now, if I tell you that one indicator of quality for me, if I narrate it through a small anecdote, you'll get a sense of what all it encompasses. Here is a teacher talking to a group of 10-year-old children in class 4 and saying, look, I have this thing that I need to discuss. What is a carnivore? What is a herbivore? Why one is a carnivore or herbivore? Can you guys just break up into 3 groups and discuss with me? Okay. And they know what they should do. They should write out what are the attributes. Let me group them. Let me collate them. I'll have some sense of it, etc. But there were 30 children. How do 30 children sit down and make sense of it?
Yeah.
To me, quality is when these children are able to understand such an exercise and then decide that, look, if we make 3 groups as Rameshwari teacher wants us, it won't happen. let's actually do something different.
Yeah.
Can we not form 6 groups? 2 of us, let's break up into two groups each.
Yeah.
And then let's come together, the 2 groups, and form 1 group and then summarize it for the teacher. Rameshwari and I are discussing other things. We are talking about her life, what she does, etc. Right. From a corner of her eye, she is observing that the 3 groups that she has formed have actually become 6 groups. And those 6 groups are discussing among themselves and then coming back again to form the 3 groups or 2 groups that Rameshwari said and presenting it to us. Rameshwari tells me this is quality. Look at the definition of quality.
Yeah.
The fact that children are able to organize themselves, think of how we should do something,
Yeah.
come together, collate it, see what's common, what is not common, list it together,
Brilliant. Yeah.
sorting, assessing, analyzing,
Yeah, yeah.
synthesizing. Now, when you look at this, all this is actually a, a level of higher order thinking and ability
That's right.
that is so organically a part of a class that she was conducting on what is herbivore and what is carnivore.
Right, right.
Carnivore and herbivore is only a placeholder, but the spirit behind it. I have
That's
many
right.
such things to tell you, but what I want to explain is that very often for us, quality and equity have to go together. Quality without equity has no meaning. In a place like this, where those 5 years are the only opportunity for a child to come out of that orbit of poverty and difficulty into something better, you cannot discuss equity without quality. You cannot discuss quality without equity. So for me, quality is, are all those 20 children in the classroom engaged? What kind of engagement do they have? How are child-to-child relations? How is a child expressing herself to her teacher? How is a teacher spending time with them? All this comes into it. What kind of assessment tools do they have? So when you go through a portfolio of work that a child has done, see the kind of things a child is a child is doing. See the kind of assessments a teacher is doing. See the kind of questions a teacher asks. I have a favorite question that I see teachers. Uh, Here was a class 4 math where a teacher was trying to explain to them place value and things like that. Very difficult for a child to understand sekada and hazar and
Right, right.
pence and units and all that. And then this guy brings out rupee notes, uses them, then he uses coins and says,
Right,
I
right.
have a coin. Then he goes to their roll number. So children have roll numbers from 1 to 30. Using those numbers, he starts constructing a 4-digit number and a 2-digit number, and then the children make understanding of what's a bigger number, what's a smaller number. And in this process, every child gets engaged. So the concept of from a digit to a number to higher, lower, ascending, descending, using a rupee note, using a coin. Then I must tell you, sorry for this digression. While
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
rupee note, suddenly he sees Gandhiji's photo on that. And then the class has a 5-minute interlude where he says, do you know who this is? They say, Gandhiji. When do you, pichle din, 1 week ago, we had Independence Day, we talked of him. But now tell me yourself. And then they go into Gandhiji, they talk of independence, they talk of society, they talk of other things. And then they come back again to is 19 greater than 17 and why is 19 greater than 17.
Right. Exactly.
Look at the board, look at the news board that they write. On a news bulletin, you will see quality. The news bulletin is not simply to say today's lesson was this and the teacher had asked a question, so let's write an answer.
Right.
The news bulletin, I think Uma and I had a conversation some time ago where Uma was moved by that example. आज सुभाष के पिताजी देहरादून से आ रहे हैं.
Wow.
So the news is that Subhash, my classmate, or I don't remember Subhash, I'm using a placeholder, but
Right.
that boy's father coming from Dehradun to that village back is such a big event for that family and for Subhash and for the village. And the second one is Pankaj ki dadi bahut bimar hai. That's news. That old lady is suffering and they had to express it there. Madhulika tells me that, look, to me, that is learning, that is quality. The fact that the children are able to empathize, develop concern for each other.
Exactly.
And incidentally, write grammatically good sentences and good. And then she teases me and says, don't think this is done. Giri, why don't you spend 3 minutes telling about your life in Bangalore and how you have come, and let's see how the children construct sentences.
Right.
The children in many schools were able to construct independent sentences of their own when I told them a few things about myself. That I come from Bangalore, it's a long way away. I come by a flight, then I take a bus, then I come to your place. And they're able to construct all this. And that's independent sentence making, that's independent meaning making, that's independent. They use numbers also because numbers are also part of it. Because if I tell them that my train travels at 70 miles an hour and I come from Delhi to this place, they're able to say how many hours I'll be taking. So it all gets woven into quality, participation, quality, concern. There can be no quality unless children are bonding and concerned for each other and the teacher is concerned about them. Over to Uma. Sorry, I got carried away.
Just one moment, Giri, before I give it to Uma, that in that example that you gave of place values, you also mentioned in, say, Satyanarayan's example, in relation to something related, he refuses to teach decimals to the children. And there, it's not although he is one of the better known teachers in that area, as far as his classes on place value and so on are concerned. And there, I think you make a comment on how this is his deep commitment to equity as well. Along with, teaching quality, he's also looking at equity, and why that is so important that the two go together.
You triggered something. So do I have your permission to say two things?
Yes, quickly.
Okay, the fact is that when Satyanarayan does that thing, he's the master of his syllabus, he's the master of his curriculum.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the teachers decide what I will teach, how much I will teach, where I will teach. Just because I have to finish lesson 7 by August 31st doesn't mean that. I want all my children to have developed sound concepts, even if it means they develop it by 7th September. I can accelerate later. So they're masters of the syllabus, they're masters of textbooks, they are the owners of their material, and they have the independence and autonomy to use it. Sorry, that was the digression.
Yeah, thanks, Giri. Uma, sorry.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to say is that I agree with every single thing that Giri has said on this relationship, especially on this relationship between equity and quality. I've always believed that in a classroom, in public school in India, in any classroom, in fact, via India public classroom, if we go for equity, if we go to reach every last child, not, that usual slogan of leave no child behind. Right. I would change the metaphor. I would not use the metaphor of leaving a child behind. I would say reach every child. Reach every child. If we go with that philosophy of that commitment of equity, I think quality will automatically follow. And quality, I would say, I agree with Giri, it's no simple thing. It's not about reading a paragraph, a bland paragraph of text at a particular speed or at a particular lexile level or whatever. It's not about doing some one or two little arithmetic operations without any context or without any, other sense. Quality means many, many things, especially in the context of the public classroom. Quality means social equity, commitment to social equity. Quality means learning to sit together with friends who are not like you, with friends who come from different homes, with friends who may be celebrating different festivals, with friends whose families may be eating different things or doing different work. And quality means sitting respectfully, working together, playing together, learning to disagree together respectfully, and exploring the world together. Quality also means not taking answers easily. I would say quality involves being risk takers, being adventurous, being bold enough to ask questions about not knowing. And the second thing that Giri said is again something that occurs to me. Quality will come when teachers are empowered. Quality will come when teachers have the freedom to ensure that a child is learning at their own pace. If a child has to read by a particular year at a particular speed, then the teacher is not empowered. The teacher is just focusing on pushing as many children through that boundary as possible. But if the teacher has the freedom to ensure that every child learns at their own pace, then you're actually not trying to push children through little pigeonholes. We're allowing children to grow at their own pace. So I think we need a much, much more nuanced understanding of quality than we currently have, and of the forms of assessing quality. Assessing quality also is not something that can be done through, a simple little checklist of 10 questions, and if the child gets 8 correct, then there's quality, and if the child gets 4. Assessing quality means a lot of child observation, looking at the comfort level of the children in the classroom, looking at the freedom with which they're free to learn. And this is something that we haven't understood, I think, the freedom to learn. Education is an empowering process. It's not just about filling a bucket or so on. We know that old saying, but about lighting a fire. And to light a fire, you need an environment which enables you to do that. And the quality is about creating that freedom within the learning environment, within the context of the classroom. That's I think a much harder thing to achieve, and yet we see all these extraordinary people, all these extraordinary educators who are committed to making that happen, which is why I think we need to respect their work by actually respecting and giving a much more nuanced understanding of the quality of their work.
You put it very well, Uma. I think all the facets of the quality that you gave and the examples that you quoted and you mentioned, Giri, and what you've written in your book kind of point us to a much more expansive view of what quality means and ought to mean, and rather than some of the more more routine ways in which we look at it. And with this, I think I'd just like to mention one thing that struck me about this book before I kind of move to questions, is that Giri doesn't like to speak about this, but I think while he doesn't come up as a person in this book in so many ways, his voice as a sympathetic observer of all these extraordinary individuals is important in telling us the story of all these people. Their stories stand on their own, but Giri has gathered them and put them together, and we have them here to read in one of the very few books of this kind. I don't know personally. I'm a teacher myself, and I was quite struck when this came out first, because I don't know of a book of this kind in this country for sure. And if you look at it, it's talking of a teacher's life in a way that makes you sit up and listen and want to engage. I felt so many times that I want to go and meet these colleagues of mine, in the public education system. And when I have met such individuals, I've had a wonderful experience, and the kind of joy de vivre that Giri brings to his writing in some places is something that I can relate to totally, very closely. And I think that is important in telling the story. It cannot be said through statistics. It cannot be said enough through surveys and through publications of that kind. It has to be in stories like this, individual lives, getting to know them as people. So these snapshots that we get to see of these many individuals that Giri writes about is something that we must all read and kind of educate ourselves. Okay, there's a world out there that we are not familiar with. There are teachers out there who are doing this work which we don't know about, frankly. And I think that's what this book has done. And I urge you all to get a copy for yourself. It is available in the Champaka online store, and the physical store is also open, so you can go and buy there as well. So please get a copy and read. And then I'm sure Giri will be happy to engage with you with your questions now and perhaps later as well. And let me just open up some of the questions that have come up with your permission. So there's one teacher by name Himani Sood, who works in an international school as an IB teacher. And she asks, private school how we, that is the private school teachers, if not private institution, can collaborate better in sharing research, pedagogical practice and resources with government school systems and teachers. So my question in some ways to both of you is how important is this relationship, and to what extent is it relevant to the work that is happening on the ground? I would like to add to that as well. Giri.
See, the thought is laudable, okay?
Yeah.
But it's a two-way street, actually, because
I'm glad you said
the private school teacher will learn as much from a government school teacher as the other way. Did I lose you?
No, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you. We heard everything.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with you, Giri.
Okay.
I have learned many things from government school teachers over the years. I completely agree with you. It's a two-way street.
Okay. And it's as simple as that's what life is all about. So,
Yeah.
so let me once again permit me to digress a little bit. But
Oh, please.
somewhere in the book, I've written that these visits to these 110 whatever schools or teachers was like a pilgrimage for me.
Right in the beginning, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do I say that? Because I think somewhere when you meet these people who are trying to create a future for these children in all these places, it's phenomenally moving. I'm sure that when people think, oh, can I bring something to them? It's not always bringing something to them. It's a two-way street. You will learn a lot from them, and just as they will learn from you. So if it can be symbiotic, I'm all for it.
I agree.
Okay. It's the same with some of the work that the foundation does. You know, the foundation has people spread across the
Exactly.
50 districts and so on. They engage constantly. There's a constant to and fro learning and developing. People become resource persons here. People become some other things there. So there's a constant amount of churn and mutual learning. So if the foundation of a relationship is a mutual learning spirit, I think a lot can be done. It's also a question of fitting times, etc. Today, for example, to answer Himani, it is not an ideal situation in the sense when I go and visit, let's say, Surpur in Yadgiri, North Karnataka, and I see that they have a voluntary teachers forum taking place on a Saturday evening or a Sunday. It is essentially the government school teachers. But if, let's say, a few private school teachers there also say, I want to participate, I'm sure they can participate, and then because then it becomes a social network.
Exactly.
Then
it's teachers getting together.
Correct. Then the academic and pedagogic interactions and mutual development will come out of those kind of social interactions.
Of course.
If those things can be opened, they can be informal, things can happen. So I just want to say that it's purely symbiotic and nothing
has to be both ways.
Yes. It cannot be.
Thanks, Gabe. No, it's very important.
मैं आपके लिए कुछ ला रहा हूं will not work.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Uma?
And not fair.
It's not fair. It's important there.
Yes, I agree with Giri. I think a collaborative approach and a mutual give and take would be a very useful and constructive way to engage. Having said that, I think engagement will yield great benefits on both sides. For example, I can see from a systemic point of view, I can see a tremendous benefit to the public school system from curriculum reform, from the curriculum reform angle and from the inquiry-based approach, for example, the IB board has devised very well, different boards are using, which is something that we don't often, we often tend to underestimate. As one of the takeaways I'm getting from this conversation is that we have underestimated the public school system and the ability of our teachers to be resilient, to teach despite extraordinary circumstances and so on. And I think curriculum reform in the public school system will take us to much better vistas for our children, especially, teaching skills, teaching problem solving, teaching critical thinking, teaching modes of inquiry, engaging with research. This is something. I also think that there are techniques of teaching certain particular subjects. To give an example of, say, a technique of teaching, say, fractions or teaching this thing, which mutual give and take will be very, very useful in dealing with. How best such collaborations can be made to happen is something that needs to be, really planned over in a very organic way by getting groups and collectives to work together informally, look at, identify areas that could potentially be beneficial to each other, maybe do a little bit of visits to each other's kinds of institutions. We should also understand that the public school system is not a monolithic structure.
Exactly.
It's, we've got the central school systems, the Kendriya Vidyalayas, the Navodaya Vidyalayas, which are highly well-resourced and good infrastructure. We've got, within the state school systems itself, we've got municipal schools, we've got government schools, and we have got residential schools. We've got schools which are run by the social welfare department, ashram shalas. They all tend to be very different. And then the local bodies, even within private schools, there are a whole series of different kinds of schools, and there are different boards as well, even among the private schools. So, having said all of the above, it's complex, but I can see a lot of mutual benefit to both systems from having a conversation begin, and I think it will be very useful.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, both of you have again highlighted the importance of the conversation. That is that it has to be a two-way exchange, and it cannot be in isolation coming from like I don't know, high castle. But so there is another couple of questions that I'll quickly read out, and you guys can decide to take them up. Which of them you want to take them first? The first question is, it's, I think, in our country, very important. Do you think caste has a role to play in terms of teachers being equitable in classrooms of a government school? How diverse were the backgrounds of the teachers included in the books? Giri, this, I think you can answer this. I'm.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, please.
See, it is a fact that when you go into a school, you will know which child is which caste, which teachers which caste. There's a board which says what they are and stuff like that.
That's it.
But having said that, you have also got to realize that a lot of children come from difficult circumstances. It's both social and economic. Okay, so it's a socio-economic barrier that they overcome. Okay, number one. I met and I was fortunate to meet. It's completely incidental and they are almost unconscious about it. All that they are concerned with is how can I help this child do better? How can I see a teacher teaching a child in class 7? All that she or he is interested in is, can I get this child going to high school? Can I get this child going to college? A teacher in second class says, can I give foundations to this child so that the child is able to go? Very often, children come from very difficult circumstances. The midday meal is actually a very good place to observe this. The midday meal very often is the only hot meal for children of parents who are laborers going early in the morning and coming back in the evening. And for them, the midday meal is very important. And you see how much care teachers take on midday meal. How much does the Bhojan Mata who prepares it take care? How much do children share and make sure that they're all well fed? What's the quality of the food that they get? All these are very important. To us, it may not seem important sitting far away, but the midday meal is a very, very important part of a school program for children like that. And I must tell you that in many places, I must admit, I've been to these heroic teachers and heroic schools. Caste is completely incidental. They are aware of caste, but that doesn't at all matter.
No, I'm
I have been also. I have also been earlier to many schools where people are aware. But I think in these kind of places, if you talk of good teachers, inspirational teachers, these are people for whom all that they care about is that the child is the center of their universe. And I'm not using hyperbole here.
Yeah, of course. No, I think so.
The child is the center of the universe. All they want is that in these few years that the child is with me, can I provide it a foundation so that they can take care of the rest of their child? Very often I'm talking of teachers who are teaching up to class 8 maximum, very often class 5 and so on.
Right. So Giri, your I think the concern of the questioner is that that there is caste. It's a reality in India. It's a lived reality for everybody. And but at the same time, and it's part of life. I mean, it is part of the teachers' lives and students' lives, everybody's lives. But at the same time, you're saying that the teachers that you have included in this book are those who, while recognizing the reality of caste, when it comes to being with children and being, being in the school and for the for the child's education, food, everything, that is not a concern. That the commitment to the child and to the education is the primary thing that you see, and that is, I think, important for everyone to hear, because we have a definite perception that everyone is casteist in some sense, but that's not the case. It's a common perception.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for that. The third question that that's here: if one had to prioritize, do we spend resources on building a quality syllabus, or give the teachers adequate freedom to work with the existing syllabus and not necessarily bound by it? So, any responses? I'll open it to both of you.
Yeah, should I go? Should I take that?
Yes, Uma, please take.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say that there's no reason why we can't do both, because I don't think the bandwidth or the resources required for doing both of these things in terms of restructure, reform the syllabus, and also to empower teachers. I think at any given point, teachers ought to be empowered, as I said before, to teach children at the pace that they need to be taught at, because no teaching can really be done at any other level, at any other pace. If that is happening, then learning won't happen. So if learning has to happen, it has to happen at the child's pace, it has to happen at the child's level. So there's nothing extraordinary about that. That is how teaching happens, and that is how learning happens. And that is the level at which teaching should be pitched. At the same time, curriculum also, the syllabus also should keep getting updated to reflect new challenges, new situations in the world, new knowledge which has been created. And I don't see the entire system. It's a different matter that both of these may not be happening. Whether they're happening at the desired level or not happening at all is a different matter altogether. But I don't see a lack of resources being the obstacle to either empowering teachers to teach at the right level and to teach at the right pace, or to reform the syllabus in an ongoing way. It's not a lack of resources. It's a systemic challenges remain, but it's not a lack of resources.
Lack of resources that you're saying. Giri, did you have anything to say on this question? Because the foundation also has been working on it, and you yourself have written about quality and learning in teachers. I don't know. Giri, you're there.
Yeah. I had some internet problems.
But no, that's all
basically, right. Uma's covered it. But I think that there is a syllabus, there are books that we talked of, textbooks, and there is also the ability to do continuous and comprehensive assessment. So in this concern, the assessment is an integral part of the pedagogy. So while you use various kinds of material, you also have the freedom to use a variety of assessments to understand a child's learning, and you exercise that freedom. Having said that, there is still a framework within which teachers operate, and that is an area of stress for many teachers. That's the reality. That funda about portion khatam karna hai, topics khatam karna hai, is a real thing. The teachers who are able to overcome it are those where they see, okay, over a period of time, I'll take them through it, not to worry. But I'll make sure I carry them along. So there is a certain amount of autonomy they exercise when they look at the pace with which children learn, the kind of assessments they use, and the kind of things that they to understand a child's learning, and what kind of exercises I should provide. And individual attention to children becomes very important. So the ability to provide individual attention is important, which is where pupil-teacher ratio also kicks in. There is a certain science to why you think a pupil-teacher science ratio is important. So the ability to provide that kind of attention, make sure, because there may be some children who have to cross a certain hump, and you have to be patient. and
course.
yet make sure that the other children are not losing interest, and then carry them up.
Exactly.
It's a very complex process. So the syllabus, the textbooks, the learning material, the assessment, the child-to-child interaction, group work, a whole lot of things that a very aware teacher brings to the classroom.
It's interesting, Giri, that you
And there's a
mentioned
lot
all
of
this.
I'm sorry, there's
autonomy.
just to complete. So there's a lot of autonomy that a teacher can exercise. Let's face it, a teacher in a village gets visited by a functionary very, very occasionally, however much you want. So she or he is the boss of that place, and she or he can use all the flexibility and autonomy that's available to them, which they do, teachers do.
And that's what I think even in your book you say, that all the things that you point out, like student teacher ratio, the various assessment landmarks that the teacher has to look at every year and so on. Despite all that, and in some cases you have 2 teachers for 5 classes, you have large numbers of students in the same room, and they have to manage that as well. But despite all of that, they know each child. The teachers that you have included here are people who know their children very well, who know, and so when we typically think of individual attention, we think of it in some ways. And in highlighting some cases here, in some extraordinary individuals here, you're showing that there are teachers who are able to look at it even despite other challenges in terms of numbers, in terms of various other things that you mentioned. So that's what I found interesting, Giri, that that some of these examples kind of are a bit counterintuitive to what we would think in some sense is possible. So it tells all of us as teachers to say, okay, I feel sometimes I work in a school where sometimes I have one student in a class. It's a very luxurious situation. So I can, what do you say? I can make the learning experience unique for that child, and that's exceptional. How often do you get that kind of privilege? It's a very privileged situation. But most teachers are able to do something like that, perhaps not in the manner that I might be describing, but knowing each child where and what input to give at what point. And that is what is...
If I can just add one thing. See, even within the schools that we visited, a place like Udham Singh Nagar, a district like Udham Singh Nagar, the school strengths are very high relative to a place like Uttarkashi in the hills.
Right.
So the pupil-teacher ratio will be different. But the fact is that many of these people, in their journey of continuous development and learning, they go through a lot of programs. So, for example, they come back, and some of them have told me that after a particular development program that they attended, these teachers, already good at their work and sincere at their work, come back and say, I'm a new person. I said, why? Because now I realize that the syllabus is not my master, but I am the master of the syllabus. They suddenly realize, so that's a huge thing for them. And then it unleashes a certain autonomy in them. So a place like Udham Singh Nagar, very different from a place like Yadgir, very different from a place like Uttarkashi. And yet they're all working towards the same goal of saying, is every child learning? Because the most important question a teacher asks himself or herself at the end of every day is every child learning? That is the most important question each teacher asks.
On that wonderful note, I think we can close today evening session. Thank you, Giri, and thank you, Uma, for being part of this. It's been an absolute pleasure having both of you speak about issues around education in context of Giri's book, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Teachers. All of you, please get your copy at the Champaka bookstore online store or in the physical store itself, if you can manage to reach there. This event was part of Reading for Change, a series co-hosted by Champaka Bookstore, Bangalore Sustainability Forum, and Science Gallery Bengaluru. This is looking at Giridhar's book, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Teacher, in the context of the UN Sustainability Development Goal of quality education. So thank you all for being patiently listening and asking your questions, and for being here today evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.